Here that you'll probably recognise if you've played PoE 1 before, but they feel a bit different to play now. Spark is great in these tight passages since it bounces around. We've added a Pierce support gem to really allow it to hit an entire room of targets. For a more single target focused skill, Arc is a good choice. It does more damage to the first target you hit. Now, if you find yourself surrounded, it might be good to use Ice Nova. It hits all enemies around you and slows them down with chill. Just be careful. Getting up close and personal isn't the ideal place for a sorceress to be. She doesn't have the defenses of a more melee-oriented character. If you want to help with the sorceress's weak melee defense though, you could use Arctic Armor. In PoE 2, Arctic Armor is a buff that builds up as you stand still. You can see the ice crystals forming around the character. They'll drop off if you walk. When monsters hit you, they take cold damage and build up to a freeze, so it's a great defense. Just be careful. You have to be standing still for a little while to get the full effect, so trying to stutter step isn't the best strategy. Now, Arctic Armor is an ongoing buff, but did you notice it didn't reserve any mana? How does that work? Well, we were pretty sick of the fact that in PoE 1 basically every character was playing with no mana pool, so we decided to change the way that reservation works. There's a new resource in PoE 2 called Spirit. Spirit is a dedicated resource you can use for ongoing effects like Arctic Armor, Heralds, Auras, or even Minions. Everyone starts with 100 Spirit, which is enough for most ongoing effects. But if you want more than one effect, you're going to need some more Spirit. Spirit is available on mods from items and on the passive tree, but if you're willing to give up your offhand slot, the easiest way to get it is by holding a Scepter. Now, if you want to increase the cold damage you're dealing, you can use a Frost Bomb. It places a bomb on the ground that reduces the enemy's cold resistance while it's ticking down. It's a great opportunity to use some cold skills before it explodes. And speaking of cold skills, a great skill to use on monsters with the slower cold resistance is Comet. This is a new skill in PoE 2, and it hits pretty damn hard. It costs a lot of mana and has a really long cast time, but it's worth the wait. It does a devastating amount of damage. To help get you out of danger, your character moves back slightly as it casts. It's pretty hard to hit a fast-moving opponent, but it's great on tougher enemies that stand still, or even a larger pack if you're further away and can predict where they're going to move. Now, if you run out of mana casting too many of those, I guess in an emergency you could cast your free-to-cast Fireball. Where did that come from, you ask? Well, this is a great opportunity to explain the way we've changed caster weapons in PoE 2. Now in PoE 1, caster weapons had a default melee attack that nobody used, and because they had that, they also had a bunch of attack mods that would spawn in them that were useless to a caster. In PoE 2 we wanted to clean that up, so now each staff comes with a built-in free-to-cast spell. Just put it on and spam to your heart's content. Now this particular staff is the base type that you get right on the starting beach, and it's quite likely that you're going to outgrow it, so that's why we have a lot of staves with more utility-focused powers for casters to use. Here we have a crystal staff. It's got a pretty cool built-in spell called Unleash. Using it slams your staff on the ground, and will allow you to triple cast whatever you cast with your next spell. Now of course you're probably going to want to use that with something powerful, and Comet is a great option. You'll notice that Unleash is one of the few skills in PoE 2 with a cooldown. In general, we really try to avoid using cooldowns because we really hate the feeling that combat is just waiting to be able to use your next skill. But it does make sense for Unleash since it's free to cast, and it's something we want you to be using situationally anyway. Now, if you're facing something tough, you might want to try out Mana Tempest. Mana Tempest creates a circle of power in which your character literally hovers over the ground. While in the circle, your mana drains, but it powers up all of your spells. Lightning projectiles fork, beams chain further, and you'll also do a lot more damage. So with all of these skills, here's a great combo to try. First, cast Frost Bomb to reduce the target's cold resistance. Then use Mana Tempest to increase your damage. Follow it with Unleash and then triple cast the Comet to do a truly insane amount of damage.
I need more time.
This rare monster dropped an uncut gem. This is a good opportunity to talk about how skill gems drop in PoE 2. Instead of dropping specific gems, you can find uncut gems. Just right click on them and pick whatever skill you want. The gem will come pre-leveled to the level of the area that dropped it, so it's a lot easier to change between skills in PoE 2. This time, I think it might be cool to grab one of our meta gems. Meta gems are skills that can have other skills socketed into them, changing how they work. In this case, we're going to select Cast on Shock. Now, let's equip this thing in the skill screen and choose a spell to trigger with it. I think Comet might be fun. Because Cast on Shock reserves Spirit, we'll need to first disable our Arctic Armor. We have to decide if we'd rather have the extra defense or the extra offense of the Cast on Shock using our Spirit. In PoE 2, trigger gems use a system of filling up cast time on each trigger. Basically, if a skill has a short cast time, then we'll trigger it really often. If it's got a long cast time, like this Comet here, it will take a lot longer to trigger. You can see up the top left that there's a counter that says how far it is until your next trigger. And there you are. Using Cast on Shock, we'll automatically cast Comet whenever we're using our lightning skills. So we've found the generator. Time to power it up. Power is restored to the Mechanarium, all the constructs are coming back to life. We'll need to fight them on the way back to the charged Soul Core. One thing that PoE 1 players might have noticed is that this character has both ice and lightning spells. That's pretty inefficient, isn't it? It's a big no-no for most builds, because any specialization into cold or lightning isn't going to affect the other element. And generic elemental damage increases are not going to be as powerful as focusing on a single element. Well, in PoE 2 we have another major new system to introduce to solve these kinds of problems, and it starts with Weapon Swap. Now in PoE 1, Weapon Swap isn't really used much for its originally intended use case. We imagined that people were going to be swapping in and out between different weapons to deal with whatever situation they were in. People just don't do that at all, and a large reason for that is because it's really awkward to do. In PoE 2 we wanted to solve that. The staff Octavian is using here has an ice mod on it that makes it great for when he's using his ice spells. We would also like to be able to make sure that the build works just as well for his lightning spells. If Octavian equips his previous staff in his second weapon set, you can see that it appears on the character's back. Now we're going to open up the skills screen. If Octavian opens up the skill options for his lightning skills, you can see here that you can choose which weapon sets are usable with each skill. First, we uncheck set 1 from being used by his lightning skills. Then we go through the cold skills and turn those off with his lightning weapon. Now, when we use Spark, the character will automatically switch to the lightning staff on his back, and then use the skill. When Octavian uses Ice Nova, his character automatically switches over to his ice staff before using it. Figure each skill for which set to use, or both if you don't mind which. There's a very short time penalty to switching, so it can be good to leave some skills on both sets if it doesn't matter which weapon set you're using. But we still have the problem of passives. Wouldn't it be nice if we could specialize in both cold and lightning passives on the character? Well, in PoE 2 you can. We're on the passive skill screen here, and you can see that we're close to both a cold and a lightning cluster. At the top right of the screen, you can see where we have some weapon set specific points to allocate. If Octavian holds shift, he can allocate set 1 to the cold passives, and then allocate set 2 to the lightning passives. Now check this out. As we weapon swap, our passive tree changes from one build to the other automatically. Whenever we cast the appropriate spell, the character's passives reconfigure on the fly to the correct build for that spell. Now you can't do this with every passive on your tree. Only points granted from skill books will allow this kind of dual specialization, so you can't change from a mace-slamming warrior into a fire elementalist with the press of a button, but it certainly increases the number of options you have for builds. There's a huge number of places where the system can shine. You could augment your Dagger Shadow build with traps, or have a great curse setup on your Witch in one spec and then move to your Chaos Debuff spells with the other. It really opens up your options.
I need more time.
Another fun meta gem to try out is called Barrier Invocation. This works a little bit like the trigger gem I talked about before, but this one charges up as your energy shield is hit by monsters. I think we might like to put an Ice Nova in this one. The more energy shield you lose, the more charge builds up until the point where you're able to cast the skill you socketed instantly. Lose some energy shield, and then at just the right time invoke Ice Nova to cast all the stacked up versions in one cast. If you keep losing shield, you'll build up even more charge for even more casts, so it's a great defensive option in an emergency.